Well, good afternoon, everybody. For those of you I haven't met yet, I'm David Fricker, the Director General here at the National Archives, and it's very good to see lots of familiar faces in the room this afternoon. And welcome to you all to the launch of our interactive version of the Digital Information Management Capability Matrix. And this is the last of our events for this Information Awareness Month of 2015. And also welcome to everyone joining us on the webcast. It's great that we're able to also offer that facility and reach out to a bigger audience than is able to come here to our room here in Canberra this afternoon. And of course a very special welcome to our guest speaker this afternoon, Ian Fitzgerald, the Chief Human Capital Officer at the Public Service Commission. And it's great to have you with us here this afternoon. And we are very much looking forward to your wisdom and insight. A few jokes, I hope. Other sort of. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Look, and may I also begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, and I pay my respect to their elders, past and present. Look, it's great to be launching this capability matrix. One thing that we are very fixed on here at the Archives is to do something about improving the professionalism across the public service, but in particular the professionalism of information management across the public service, across the Commonwealth, I should say. Something that is very important for us, I suppose, is that as we've moved ahead, and I'm also reflecting on my experience perhaps, and I'm probably one of the older people in the room here today, but baby boomers like me who joined the public service. I started in 1979 as a computer programmer in the Customs Service, and we had a mainframe computer and we were programming away, and information technology, or ADP in those days, was already commonplace, and it was becoming more and more commonplace in the public service. And so throughout my career in Canberra, working with the public service, it has just been a fixed part of the landscape that we have used IT, we've used information technology, and we've been building databases and making all sorts of great changes in the processes and the systems that we use around IT. And alongside that, we've also been, of course, adhering to record keeping and records management, etc. But what I think we've seen is in some ways a bifurcation of those two things. So we've seen technology management, process management on one hand, and records management still going on as a separate process. And what we do have to do is recognise now that information is becoming much more than something which feeds an automatic process, a computer system, and records are something which provides evidence of business activity or the records of decisions made, etc. And we've got to start thinking about information. Information is one of the raw materials of government, and information is indeed one of the raw materials of the 21st century, that everything we're doing in the services that we're delivering, in the policies that we're formulating, and indeed across society runs on information. And the availability, the accessibility, the authenticity, the quality of information is directly affecting individuals' access to justice, individuals' access to their own rights and entitlements, and basically it's affecting the quality and the validity of government. And so in that regard, it is absolutely central to all of us as professionals, as professional public servants, as professional servants of the Crown, if you like. So we can't be overlooking the need to ascend to and realise and achieve and maintain much higher levels of professionalism. And as we look across what's required to be a professional public servant at the moment, as we look across the way that we are designing jobs in the Commonwealth sector and the way that we're recruiting people, we see that if, and we did a quick survey of job ads quite recently, looking at jobs in the finance areas in government departments across the public service. And in every case, there is some qualification needed. You can't be working in a finance section or a chief financial officer unless you've got some sort of certification or professional qualification in financial management, a certified practicing accountant or something similar to that, or a member of a professional association, etc. But then we looked across information management positions, and of course you won't be surprised to know that none of those advertisements mention any sort of requirement for any sort of professional certification or qualification. Now, we need to change that. And especially, you know, the National Archives, as being the overseer of record-keeping standards across the Commonwealth, and now, as we talk about it, information management across the Commonwealth, we need to do something to change that. We need to be doing something to establish as commonplace the recognition and the requirement for professional certification across information management. Because information management is much more today than it was, say, 30, 35 years ago, when I started in the public service. It is far more than that now, and it's as I say, it's much more than either keeping a record or running an IT system. It's become completely entrenched within everything we do and the extent to which we're able to achieve anything across the public service. And so what we do need to do is to recognise the value of information management, and as we're talking about today, recognise the value of information managers. We need to make sure that as part of the overall governance of organisations, the decision-making, the policy-making, the decision-making, the operational decisions in all government agencies, information management is recognised. That information managers have a seat at the table when those important decisions are being taken, when spending decisions are being made, when strategies are being formulated, when decisions are being made about amalgamation or you know, machinery of government changes, etc. We need to make sure that information managers are recognised and they have a seat at the table. Because it's not an easy task at all anymore. Information management is quite challenging, it's quite complex, and it requires a range of abilities. It's much more than being someone who's technologically savvy, or someone who knows about file titling, or someone who knows about classification. It's got to be someone that understands the agency's business information needs at a high level, at a high conceptual level. It's got to be someone who is able to talk and understand IT specialists within organisations and talk to the IT industry. To be across the range of legislation and standards that affect information management. So there are big issues in information policy at the moment. We need people that understand privacy, that understand big data, that understand access to information. So there are major policy information policy issues that need to be across. Metadata. We need people to know what metadata is and understand metadata and what it actually means and how it's important across government. Interoperability. You know, it's a buzzword across government to talk about interoperability, but not often enough do we talk about information interoperability. And that, you know, it's one thing to build up silos of information holdings in each government agency, government department, etc. So, you know, it's like that analogy of railway gauges. You know, every state in Australia could, you know, build a beautiful railway network, but of course if you're trying to ship something from one side of the continent to the other and the gauges don't match, it doesn't really help you actually achieve the bigger picture. And information in the 21st century is the same. We've got to ship that information around at lightning speed, and we have to make sure that it's usable and reusable. It can be combined without breaching security, without breaching privacy, without breaching confidentiality, etc. There's more to the list. Information managers need to be project managers, and they need to be agents of change, because nothing is changing as fast as information management. They need to be good at changing the needs, adapting to the changing needs of their organisation. Also leadership, communication and influencing skills, because we need to be influential in sending out the messages that we need to send out, and we need to be influential members of organisations if we're going to make these changes that need to be made. And so for those reasons, this capability matrix that we're launching today as part of our professionalisation strategy is just a really important milestone. The other thing about the matrix that we're launching today as well is recognising that it's more than just the information management professionals within the organisation. So we do need identified individuals within organisations whose advice can be relied upon in terms of information management policy and information management decisions. But information management affects everything. It affects all activities across all organisations. And so the matrix goes beyond just identifying the the skills and capabilities required of those specialists. We have to recognise that ICT staff within organisations have got to be more included, have got to be more knowledgeable, have got to be more aware of information management issues. And so we need professional capabilities for ICT staff and also all staff, because every professional public servant, every professional staff member of a Commonwealth agency has got code of conduct to adhere to, and they've got professional obligations that they must meet. And a lot of that goes back to accountability, impartiality, ethical standards, and all of this comes back to the way that they treat the information that they have received or created or they have in their care. So the capability matrix is information management specialists, but also ICT staff, and then all staff in the organisations. And so in that way it's quite unique in those two aspects. One, that it's stratified those three areas within each organisation, and the other thing that's unique about it is that it's interactive. And so as well as being, going beyond what you would get from a static document in terms of just laying out what capabilities are required to achieve these levels of professionalism, this is interactive. So it does allow people to use this, to drill into it, and also it has interactive links to resources which can be used to actually provide more information and provide more assistance to achieve, to realise these professional standards. And so for all of those reasons, it's a delight for me to be here today to launch this product, and also it's an opportunity for me in particular to thank my staff, the staff here at the Archives, for the work, the groundbreaking work, the quite innovative work that's gone into producing this, which I think is now a very useful, accessible, and dare I say it, enjoyable tool to actually use to make this change happen. And in terms about making the change happen, if you can indulge me for a moment, let me gaze into my crystal ball and talk about what it is we are trying to achieve through all of this. Why are we implementing these products and implementing these changes? What is it that we're trying to see happen? Many of you would have heard me speak at length in past events about our digital continuity policy, our Digital Continuity 2020, the targets that we are setting, and this is one of them, the targets we are setting to achieve across the Commonwealth by the year 2020. So by the year, the 1st of January in the year 2021, some of the things that we're expecting to see, that we're aiming to see, is that in each agency there will be designated information management specialists. So as I say, we haven't come up with a good name, a catchy name for this, and I'm looking at Kerry because she's given me one to read out here today, but that's right. Well, I'm not game to read it out, but no, because we are sort of talking about, of course, we're familiar with terms like Chief Information Officer, which was, I think, was a great thing to recognise that there was a position in the organisation along with a Chief Financial Officer, Senior Legal Advisor, Chief Information Officer. Perhaps we need something like a Chief Information Governance Officer who is actually making sure that the activities and the policy frameworks are in place. But also, as I say, that there is an identified person or individual within the organisation, supported by a team perhaps, but who is capable and qualified to provide rock-solid advice to the CEO of the organisation on matters of information management. So that's one thing that we're hoping to have in effect in place by the year 2021. And that designated position or positions may be at different levels depending on the organisation and the size and the scale of the organisation, but there will be one or more. Those designated roles will be underpinned by recommended qualifications or experience for positions at lower levels, so it will also support a career progression. So there'll be a career path that will take people up to that level and beyond. So it'll be a fundamental and valued part of the career structures within the broader public service, within the Commonwealth. I'd also hope to see that all job advertisements will recognise that as well. So when we're recruiting staff, either we're recruiting people with those qualifications or we're recruiting people who are on the way to getting those qualifications, or the achievement of those qualifications will be supported as a part of that position. For those that don't hold that qualification, the National Archives will provide a training and certification or accreditation program at a range of different levels. So that's something that we're taking on as an obligation for us, that we'll be making sure that we are facilitating through ourselves or through third parties pathways to achieve that certification. What are you doing back there? Is that right? It's just a thought for a moment there's some joke screen that's appearing behind me over here. All right, thank you. We're back on track. That's very good. And also that we'll have a program in place to make this a sustainable program, that at the archives we will also support programs to maintain those levels, to keep those levels of professionalism up to date and at the leading edge, I suppose, of the skills that we do need to do it. So in terms of how we're getting there, over the next year we'll be working with information managers across the Commonwealth, as well as with professional associations, with tertiary institutions, to get those sort of programs in place and get the strategies in place so that we can get there by 2020. And we'll be looking at possible partnerships with industry and the broader educational sector as well. So we'll certainly be reaching out and grabbing what we can that already does exist, or working with like-minded organisations to make sure that we do achieve this and keep it running. And also we're setting a 2020 target. As I keep saying, these sort of goals are not something that we can set for this financial year or for whatever. It has never been our intention or our aspiration to drop impossible targets on organisations that require a lot of funding or require new projects or require new recruitment. We are living in financially constrained times. All of us are trying to balance very tight operational demands upon us, and at the same time we're all being expected to implement strategic shifts as well. And so the reason that we time these things to be achieved by the year 2020 is for that very reason, because if we're going to do this strategically and properly, then we've got to give ourselves sufficient time to actually work towards this target. So I do remind everyone that this is a target for 2020, and unlike other regulatory requirements dumped on us all from time to time, I think this is an achievable time frame. And I would also, recommit that the National Archives is committed to doing everything it can and it should to make sure that we are being supportive and facilitative and providing solutions to make sure that we can achieve this across the Commonwealth. So, I am once again delighted to be launching this capability matrix today to ensure that we are on a pathway to recognising the professionalism within the public service, but also the professionalism in specialist positions within Commonwealth agencies to make information management a reality. And as part of that launch today, I'm now delighted to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Ian Fitzgerald. Ian, as I said earlier, is the Chief Human Capital Officer at the Australian Public Service Commission. Ian started work in the justice sector, and he worked in the UK Home Office in London and with Westpac and the ANZ Bank before joining the APSC in 2011. So a really great wealth of experience, international experience, that is being brought to bear in your role in the Commission, but also to talk to us today. And Ian's role in the Commission includes the overall people strategy function. So again, it is extremely fitting that we have Ian here to talk today about human capital and the value that we need to be deriving from our human capital across the public service. So please join me in welcoming Ian to the podium. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I've been trying to think of some jokes. If we were talking to economists or accountants, that would be easier. But I can't think of any, but I might think of some along the way. So, let me join in acknowledging, David, in acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land upon which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past and present. It's fitting to do this, of course, at the National Archives of Australia, given the role this organisation plays in keeping records, historical records for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and communities. David, thank you for the invitation to speak today to launch the Digital Information Records Management Capability Matrix. Thank you, which covers all Australian government departments. The Commissioner is interstate. John would have been here otherwise today. So, and hello for those watching on the webcast. Hope the camera angle is flattering for me. If need be, you can just shift it just a little bit. And the light's quite bright on this side. But there's a few reasons why I think the matrix is important. One is to start with the business problem. Governments need to preserve the paper and celluloid past, but also capture our digital future. This implies for me an evolving set of capability needs for all of us, and particularly for specialists in the field. Organisational capability is obviously very important to me. One of my programs was the Capability Review Program, and through that program we reviewed the capability of 23 departments and major agencies. That included the ATO, ABS and Customs. The reviews confirmed what everyone here would know, that information management is a critical enabler of strategy delivery and leadership capabilities in organisations. Good policy is based on good information. In the business world where I came from before this role, there's a theory about a firm's absorptive capacity. And this relates to its ability to recognise unique value in new information, to assimilate that information and to turn it into something that is valuable from a customer's perspective and ultimately the business perspective and shareholder perspective. I can say, and I think it's ever more important in the public sector than it is in the private sector to be doing that well. And I can say after 23 reviews that there is a system-wide need to improve information management capability in the APS. The rapid rate of change in the environment increases the importance of that work. One quote from the Australian Bureau of Statistics report was, or is, these reports are all available, the emergence of big data and different ways of managing information will be a challenge for the ABS, both in terms of practices and culture, particularly the way it interacts with data, creates information and relates to other stakeholders. That's not an isolated example through the 23 reports. Another reason for my interest is one that David's covered quite extensively already, and that's in terms of our need in the APS to attract, develop and retain the best people for all roles. Every job in the APS is important. Every job should have standards. Everyone, in my view, should be part of a profession, and there should be standards for that profession that people strive to meet and held to account for. In a practical sense, that means clearly defining the responsibilities and capabilities for each role. Too often in my view, and particularly in the 5 years I've been in the public sector, too often we've seen some roles as roles that anyone can do. And I find that really surprising, and that is different to my experience in the private sector. As David said, you wouldn't just place anyone in a finance role. There's standards, there's accreditation, there's professionalism. But certainly in terms of my profession, HR, we do just put people in HR roles, and that's something that the Commissioner is really keen that we look at in terms of standards for HR, and we're doing some good work with other jurisdictions around capability frameworks for HR. And some of that will draw on the work of the UK, I mentioned in a second. And I suspect it's fair to say, and in fact I know now because I've just heard David say it, that sometimes information and record management roles haven't had the standards or professional credibility that sitting behind them. I don't think it's ever been the case that wasn't needed, and it's certainly nonsense to say it's not needed in the future with the shift to the digital capabilities that we'll need in the future. My view is, and I've had the opportunity to work in the UK and more recently to study some of their reform processes, one aspect of that reform is to create 22 professions for the civil service. So the civil service reform process was seen to need also a focus on capabilities to get that job done. And everyone in due course will be expected to belong to one or more of those professions. And one of those is the government knowledge and information management profession. And of course there's one for HR too, which is one I'm also interested in. And I like the quote from the 2012 Civil Service Reform Plan, which is, "The old idea of a civil service generalist is dead. Everyone needs the right combination of professionalism, expert skills and subject matter expertise." Well, I agree with that. To me, that's common sense. There are consequences if information is not managed well, and there are opportunities if information is managed well. And the capability matrix, of course, sets some of those standards. It separates out those capabilities for all of us, those for ICT professionals and those for information and knowledge management specialists. And of course, the framework is just a starting point. It must be operationalised. And this occurs when it becomes the foundation for clearer role definition, development, performance management, and where warranted, promotion decisions. Now, my third reason, one of the other things I get to do is speak to all new members of the SES, and talking about long-range risk assessment, horizon scanning, and some of the drivers that will impact the public service over the next decade or so. And one that's absolutely there is around, I know we talk about it, but it's really important, is in relation to the way that the digital drivers of change are affecting us now and will affect us in the future. And we are seeing, of course, with the Digital Transformation Office and other initiatives, a real focus in those areas. But in a sort of really personal way, you know, we're wiring up the planet. And I read somewhere that there's 15 billion people and things that are connected today, and that will be 1 trillion people and things connected by 2050. And all of those interactions create data and information, and that needs to be processed. And I haven't got I can't remember the person who said this, but he made the point that we need computers to help us with this, because human beings haven't had a brain upgrade in 50,000 years. So it's not mine, it came from somewhere else, so I haven't got the quote. But the complexity that arises from all those interconnections across social, biological, technological areas is just, the complexity is phenomenally interesting too, particularly people who work with big data. But it also generates an enormous amount and perhaps an exponentially increasing amount of data, information, and hopefully that we can turn into good knowledge. And all of this has important policy and regulatory implications. And just this morning I was at an event with the Secretary who was talking about just the magnitude of the increases in the workload that department would need to deal with less money in the future. And that requires a different way of thinking, and obviously it requires the experience of people of that department to be more like banks than the experiences in the past. But hopefully the work today that's being launched today will help us deal with that growing volume, amount of information. I commend the National Archives of Australia for doing this work, and not just on the matrix, but the way in which agencies were engaged and other organisations in its development. I understand that the work is not just being recognised here, but overseas as well. And of course, capability matrices like this, or the HR work that we're going to be doing, is all absolutely compatible with things like the ILS that we all know and love. But now it's up to us as individuals and leaders to use it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. I'll just present you with this very small, very modest souvenir of your...
Declare it.
That's right, yeah. No, when you open it, you'll realise you don't have to declare it. So. No, it's not, but thank you very much. Sincerely, it was very much appreciated. Look, thank you. And that was... I do like that quote about the brain upgrade. I have to find out... well, no, I'll just steal it from you, actually. I'll use that in future. But no, look, thanks for that. And it's really great to hear you reflect upon, you know, your vision for the future of the Australian government and the human capital that we have, you know, to work with and develop across the government. And I think it really very, very useful to place what we're doing into that broader context. So thank you very much for your contribution this afternoon. So now it just leaves it to me to thank you all, to everyone who's joining us on the web. Now you can reach for your food and your drink and celebrate. The capability matrix is accessible on our website. So again, for those watching us online, it can be accessed from either our front screen or through the records management link on our website. For those of us present here this afternoon, it's available on machines strategically located around the room, so we do invite you to come and have a look. And most of all, I invite you all to join us for something to nibble on and something to drink as we socialise and network. So thank you again, and once again, if I can thank my own team at the Archives for putting this together, and finally once again to thank Ian for those words this afternoon. Thank you all of you. Thanks.